By listening to this short ad, you are supporting our podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There is creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you. Hello. Professor Bruce McGraw is an active member of American academia, philosophy, religious studies, humanities, and mythology, and other aspects of scientific life. Bruce won first place awards from the San Diego Press Club for Best Series, Best Commentary, and Best Science Environmental Writing. Bruce McGraw is about to publish a book titled The Magical Universe, Answering the Call of Climate Change for Global and Personal Transformation. Also, he runs the website themagicaluniverse.neomythology.com. So please tell us about your academic life and also tell us about your book.
Okay, well, I teach in the community colleges now, primarily at Palomar College and Cuyamaca, and I teach a variety of subjects from different religious studies classes to philosophy classes to mythology classes. I've been teaching a course on the New Testament, done humanities classes, so I've done quite a wide variety of subjects in that general area. So that's why my book is kind of an all-encompassing book. So it's really kind of my original title. My first book I wrote was The New Mythology. I haven't published that one yet, but that was a longer and much more detail. And a couple people read that book and decided that it was too detailed and people would get lost in the details. So I decided, okay, I put that one aside, so I decided to write a smaller book. So I wrote this new one, which I entitled The Magical Universe, that's kind of a briefer summation. So this one's a little under 20,000 words. The bigger one is about 72,000 words. So I thought I would go ahead and publish this shorter one because I want to give people a feel for what this new view is, and then maybe later, when people get a kind of an overall sense of it, if they wanted more details, I would then later on probably publish the second book as kind of a more detailed version of the first book. So
cool. So do you think that it is possible that we can change? I check out on your website. I believe we can get an idea about your book from your website, and that is that you have a new point of view that we should look at other people and also at the universe from a different perspective.
Right. Yeah, so I think what we need is a new mythology, although in a lot of ways it's not really a new mythology. It's taking a lot of the ancient wisdom and sort of updating with a lot of scientific knowledge that we have now. So in some ways I'm not really saying anything new. I'm just sort of taking what ancient wisdom teachers and applying it to today's science and sort of melding the two together to get this. Because I think one thing we've lost in this modern age is this notion of wisdom. And we think, if you know a lot of stuff, that's pretty good. But wisdom's of a whole different character. And we don't hear people talking much about wisdom these days. So I think we need to get back to these wisdom teachers who have great things to teach us. And even though they might have lived 2,000, 2,500 years ago, they still have great insights that we need to use. But of course, in a way, we have to update them to the modern world because obviously 2,000, 2,500 is a very different world than it is today.
Yes.
So it needs to be updated. And I think one of the big areas that maybe they were not aware of the way we are today is this idea of evolution. And, now we know, they didn't know this, that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, going from the Big Bang up to us right now. And so every worldview is kind of based on a creation story. The old mythologies are based on a creation story. And even what I call our modern industrial rational worldview that we've been living under for about 400 years is also in a way based on a creation story. And I think that creation story, which we now know as the Big Bang, it's given us a lot of information and we've learned a whole lot. So I'm not attacking it. It's not, we can't believe science, so we have to believe science. It's shown. But the Big Bang, what's behind the Big Bang is a worldview that basically tells us we live in a meaningless, purposeless universe. That everything was created. The whole Big Bang was an accident. We're accidents. We really shouldn't be here. We don't have any higher purpose really than to be here accidentally. And when you have a worldview like that, that's so nihilistic, it's going to have negative impacts. And I think it's going to tell people, at least on a subconscious level, that this life is all you have. Go for it. So that means use up all your resources, destroy the environment, because tomorrow we're going to die, and what does it matter? And, there's limited resources. We're going to fight these wars over these resources, and we're going to rip up the climate, which is exactly what we're doing right now. So the idea that, that you can't solve a problem from the mentality that created it, we're still in this modern industrial rational worldview, and we're trying to some extent to solve this problem from that point of view, and you can't do it. You've got to pull back and see it, I think, in a much broader perspective to begin to deal with it, not only globally, but even just individually, our way to deal with climate change.
Well, yeah, I just want to say here that, okay, the problem is, that's what I think, is that especially when you come to climate change, I see that most of those who oppose the idea that there is something called climate change usually are from the conservative side.
Right.
Except for George Carlin, for example. He was not religious at all, yet he has some videos where he mocks the whole idea of saving the planet or the environment, and he thinks that we see it from an arrogant point of view, that who we are in the first place to save the planet, to say. But also, I see that there is also the religious side, which is very arrogant in the sense that as if that God gave us this whole planet and we can do whatever we want with it. So how you combine these two contradictory points of view? One of them is almost atheist point of view, and has no belief in the climate change almost, or that we cannot do anything. And the other side is religious, and it argues for the same thing, that we cannot do anything about it.
Well, I think, you have to sort of split it down the middle. Obviously, I don't agree we can't do anything about it, or that we should do anything about it. It's our home. It's sort of like sitting and watching your home getting burnt down and go, well, I can't really do anything. I'm just going to let my home burn down. No, we want to protect our home. I think we're supposed to move on. The whole history, as I go back in this creation story of 13.8 billion years of evolution, takes us to right now. And what people understand is that we're still evolving. And, that is our purpose, to continue our own evolution, both personally and globally, as a culture. And so for me, the way I look at it is climate change is sort of the universe's way to wake us up. And it's saying, sure, the modern industrial rational point of view has done a lot of wonderful things. I don't want to say, we have to get rid of the whole thing, because we can't, because it's given us great advances in science, which we want to hang on to. It's given us great advances of technology. It's improved the way of life for many people. A lot of people are still left behind, and that's some of the things that need to be taken care of. And it's improved medicine. And, there's a lot of areas we don't want to lose that. The modern industrial world has done a lot of good things, but it's also has some limits and some problems. So when we move on to the next one, the idea is you want to include and transcend. So every time you go from one stage to the next, you want to include the best of what that earlier stage has, and then move on and deal with the problems it's created. So this modern industrial worldview has created this problem, and we need to kind of see ourselves as part of this evolutionary process. And this is a catastrophe that we may not survive, but it's a catastrophe that's put here because the universe is sort of telling us it's time to move on. And I believe if you take a look at the evolution of the universe over 13.8 billion years, that, at the very beginning, all the way up to human beings and our advanced mentality, it's just hard to believe that such a development like that over billions and billions of years could have all been just accident and random. Yeah. So my sense of evolution is what I call intelligent intention. And I think there's this intelligence that has this intention that's moving the process forward, and we're a part of that. And it doesn't stop with us. That we need to continue to evolve ourselves consciously, and this is the wake-up call that it's time to move on. We have to move on with this obsession with materialism and focusing just on all this wealth and destruction that we have to climb out of it. We need, I guess you would say, a spiritual revolution. And I do want to say my brew is not intelligent design, because I don't believe, as intelligent design theorists would believe, that there's a God outside the whole thing that's directing it. It's more, my position, I'd say, would be more of a Buddhist, that it's the intelligence is inherent in the creative process. It's not something separate, but it's the thing that is driving it. Yes. And the same way that, you have an acorn that has the oak tree already embedded in it, and it develops into an oak tree if it gets the proper nourishment and everything. And so I believe at the beginning of the Big Bang, before that was this little singularity that's smaller than a trillionth of an atom, this dimensionless, spaceless point. And everything we see around us, as far as we can see, came out of that little point. And so everything is interconnected. We're all interconnected. And within that little point was human beings. In fact, the physicist Freeman Dyson said, the more I study evolution and the architecture of the universe, he says, the more I start to think that the universe knew we were coming. In other words, we were there. We're a part of the plan. And so it's up to us to save this thing. And it's not arrogance, and it's not that we can do whatever we want. I mean, to me, those are the ideas we just have to get rid of, and we have to move beyond those ideas.
Yes. I think that probably your point of view might become like a worldwide, I don't know, like many people have started doing it, what you just said. But I think that maybe you should also focus on the future, on more widening because I know there is a political outcome from your point of view, because to create a new world or a new perspective, that there are, for example, there are dictators on this earth. There are bad people who are trying to destroy it as much as possible. And but yeah, like change comes from one individual sometimes, and then the idea spreads everywhere. So what do you think about, for example, American foreign policy? Like, how can we convince regimes, or for, let's say, like China or North Korea or somewhere else? There are some tyrants and dictators who just see themselves. So how you implement all this philosophy in every aspect? Yeah.
Well, I just think it starts with an awakening in this country. And, I don't know if there's anything good about Trump getting elected. It's that he's woken people up. You know, it was always my fear, and I did vote for Hillary Clinton, and I wanted her to become president over Trump, but it was always my fear that if she got in, there's always a sense when a Democrat gets in, everybody would be like, oh, okay, we've taken care of the problem. But climate change was continuing to get worse. Yes. And so Trump has been a disaster. But one thing he's done is to sort of waken up the country and the world, and especially dealing with this coronavirus issue, we've really seen how incompetent he is. Yes. And so it always, for some reason, human beings don't seem to learn until there's a disaster. And something has to shake that worldview. And now we're at the point where that worldview is getting shaken. And all of a sudden, people are looking out at in LA, they have clean air. In New Delhi, they have clean air for the first time. People are saying, I think Bill McKibben of 350.org said people are now gulping clean air in some places for the first time in their lives. And, you know, it sets a precedent. And I think, you know, out of the ashes of these disasters, something new can be born. But it's a growth of awareness. And as Bernie Sanders said, you have to create a movement. And I think, you know, at least as Americans, we have to at least start in this country and, you know, and get our leadership right and get the views right. And then we can go out there and on climate change and these other issues, really stand for higher values. And I think people in those other countries, you can see it in Hong Kong. You can see worldwide protests everywhere, all over the Middle East, all over Africa, Europe. People want a change. It's there, but the leaders are holding it down. And, you know, I think the U.S. can be a beacon, you know, maybe for the future, for everybody, not as a dictatorial power of, you know, exploiting other countries' resources, but a real moral and spiritual leader for the country. And, you know, that transcends all different individual religions and everything. So I think, you know, it starts at home. It starts with the individual and, you know, it expands out from there. I think the U.S. has got a lot of issues they need to take care of first before we can really become a force in the world right now. And hopefully we can start that in November.
Yes, hopefully. Yeah, like I have seen that one of the biggest problems with Trump is that these people, especially those who I think they are have kind of illness because they defend him no matter what he does. So yeah. It's a kind of cult. Like they don't provide you any evidence or scientific point of view, or they just will defend him no matter what. So I think America has gone backward, and you are right on that point that suddenly we all woke up that we discovered that something is wrong here, because
right.
I myself, I was a Republican until 2016.
Oh.
Yeah, and when Trump came, I decided, no way, I'm not staying in this camp. So, and that's why, like, I see it very interesting that you are driving Americans to see this wrong and see what is the right thing to do, and that is to see the whole earth as united, that we all are humans before anything. So, okay, so how you combine the care for the climate and at the same time the worldwide problem of poverty, for example, because many people, as you know, need jobs. They need the creation of jobs, factories, and this is like a very tricky area, because you create new jobs, but also you get the environment, like like we get the pollution, and the climate gets very bad. So what you will try to do here?
Well, I think as a lot of people are trying to support is like a strong Green New Deal.
Yes.
And so now, especially as the economy sort of collapsed and oil prices are actually negative now, they actually will pay people to take oil off their hands. I think this is the perfect opportunity to slowly get off our oil addiction and move into a strong green economy, green our energy system. And as people have said, this will create lots of good paying jobs around the world, good clean jobs. And it seems to me that can be something that can be fostered around the world also. I mean, every country needs to create these kinds of things. And I think, we probably need stronger international institutions that, run more on a humanitarian, moral basis that can aid other countries. And, once we start realizing we're in this together, we're starting to see more and more that these are planetary problems. The virus we're suffering now is affecting everybody. The climate change is affecting everybody. And the more we see that, the more we realize we need global institutions to begin to take care of this. And we're all in this together. Either as a planet, we're going to sink together or we're going to rise up together. And so we have to sort of embrace, everybody on this planet. And as we see we're more interconnected, the need for these huge defense budgets and wars and everything, I think people are going to realize that is so 20th century. We don't need that anymore. We don't have to be run by this fear all the time. I mean, it's going to be a gradual process, but I think, we have to start moving in that direction. And greening the economy can provide good, well-paying jobs, also improve the environment, and really create, something new on this planet. Obviously not going to be easy because climate change has gone on too far, and there's going to be a lot of repercussions already kind of baked in. We're going to go through some really difficult times, but as Al Gore was just saying the other day, it's not too late to head off the worst parts of it, and we can adapt. There's going to be some bad things happening, but we can adapt. We can still pull this thing out. But we need to act soon. We don't have any time. And that's why, another 4 years of Trump could absolutely be disastrous to this planet, as he's even now just lifting all the environmental regulations and everything. He's using this crisis to just basically not only trying to destroy democracy, but really in his way destroy the planet. So, I think there's only one way forward, and we're at this pivotal point right now. And we have to grab it and move forward. And I believe there is this awakening that's happening. So, I think the new economy is going to be clean and it can provide good jobs. I think this notion between jobs and environment is a false notion. And as we're seeing more and more, I don't think that's the real problem there. We can have both.
That's really good. For example, and even if you take a look at the American history, you see that, for example, Theodore Roosevelt, he done some great job when he created the national parks, and he gave them a kind of protection. But now Trump is doing just the opposite. He's trying to even give these natural areas to businesses and companies to exploit it and even destroy it.
Right.
And if we take a look at at China, I believe because they have a tyrannical government, people have no say in it. That's why you see in these states and nations, they suffer a lot from pollution and bad air. So, do you think that America is really going to learn from these tyrannical states? Because as much as I see Republicans talking about China, for example, but they are trying to do with Trump just what the Communist Party is doing with President Xi or Kim of North Korea. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle. There's no guarantees that we're going in the right direction. That's why everybody's voice and what everybody individual does is important. Nothing's guaranteed. There are no guarantees. We could go the way as a lot of the dictatorships, like Orban in Hungary or in Poland or, in Egypt or any of these other places. We could go in that direction very easily. It's definitely a possibility. We're at the precipice here. We can go one way or we can go the other way. And I think, it all depends on the people, how they, and not in mass, but also each individual has to kind of look inside themselves and, ask themselves what kind of world do they want for themselves and for their children. Because, if we manage to turn this around, and in the future, people will be writing stories. They'll be writing new myths about what happened in this age. They'll look back and say, if it wasn't for those people back there in the early 21st century that stood up and made these big changes, we wouldn't even be here today. We owe them such a gratitude of thanks. And we don't do it for that, but that will be, we are at this heroic time right now. And, we can either answer the call or not. And, it's really up to us, and it's up to each individual in their own heart of hearts to make that decision. It's the answer's blowing in the wind, as they say.
Yeah.
No guarantees.
Well, I can't but agree with you on that, because I just say that, I see, for example, Republicans, for example, I made an audio about a Republican guy who was talking about, this beautiful America, it has natural places you can see. But at the same time, I said, well, that's a contradiction, because he's now supporting a president who is trying to destroy this nature. I mean, this country is beautiful because we are trying to save its natural resources. And you remind me of the famous philosopher Spinoza, but somewhat you are more, but you are going to a different direction. So how can can you make your philosophy more can you bring some Republicans to our side, for example, because the new atheism, the militant atheism, I believe, made those Republicans angry, because they think that the new atheism made life meaningless. And but your book is offering a meaningful side to this, that no, we have a meaning. And so can you go over that how you will use even religion itself to support this climate change issue and educate people about it?
Well, I think that, as you say, the New World View does have a spiritual component, although there's a lot of, I don't mean to just, in general, I'm talking about the Big Bang as being, it is sort of atheist and meaningless and purposeless, but I don't mean to denigrate atheists per se, because a lot of people are atheists. They're good people. They care about the future. So, you don't necessarily have to believe exactly what I'm saying. Although I think, because I think a lot of atheists, if you actually ask them questions about, do you believe in God? And they say no, but they usually think you're talking about this God, like a Christian God or a Jewish God, or maybe the Muslim God that's outside of creation, that's, directing things. No, I don't believe in that. But then if you start talking more about kind of what I'm talking about, which is more inherent, then some of them might go, well, maybe something like that I might accept. So you got to be careful. You never say you believe in God. You always have to say, well, how do you define God? To make sure that's what they do. And I think, as for religious people, it does have a spiritual component. I look at the creation stories. You go back to the mythologies, even the creation stories in the Bible, and, we can't take them as literally true. We know they're not true. But the one thing they had meaning and purpose. So people liked them because they believed there was a God looking out for them, they had a place in the universe, and they did these certain things. They were going to go to heaven. It gave them comfort. And then the Big Bang comes along, kind of throws all that out, but doesn't really replace it with anything. We get a lot of knowledge, which we need, but, even if some of these religious people were inclined to believe in the science, they kind of go, I don't want to believe in this meaningless, purposeless world. That makes me feel so bad. I'd rather just, even though I know all your arguments might even be right, I want to stay with this world view that has a meaning and purpose, and that there's a God in it, and I have a place, and it makes them feel at home. So I think for those that might be willing to embrace the scientific world, except they don't like the lack of meaning and purpose in it, that I offer them kind of an alternative, because they can keep their meaning and purpose and also embrace the science that comes with it. So I think, at least for some people, that could be a bridge. It could be a bridge for both groups to come together. And of course, there's always going to be people that are not going to be convinced by anything. I mean, you just can't convince them, and you can do your best, but then,
Yeah.
and I believe they're just a small minority, and you just have to work on those that are open to change is the way I would deal with it.
So like flat earthers, maybe. Because
I mean, climate deniers. I mean, it's the climate deniers are, it's at the point where it's not worth the time to fight with them anymore. I mean, I think they're in such a minority. It's just, unfortunately they're in power, so you have to deal with them. But as an idea, there's just nothing to say to people like that. You just have to get them out of office.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I think, the climate change problem is so horrible because we're talking about the end of life that even people, I think, who accept climate change still are not quite willing to accept the immediacy of the problem because it's too terrible. And that's why we don't see strong actions. And I think the real fear of climate change that people have is not so much climate change, but it's the fear and doubt and whatnot, the powerlessness to do anything that they get when they think about it. So the real problem with climate change isn't climate change, it's the way people feel when they think about it. It makes them feel terrible. It makes them feel weak, like they can't do anything. It's like looking at a black hole. And so you go, I don't know what to do about that. I'm going to go do something else. I don't want to think about it. Other people can solve that problem. It's too much for me. But I think part of what my philosophy is that we need to face those inner fears and those inner uncertainties, and we have to go through them. And because on the other side is what I would call our true selves, our eternal selves, and that's the self that will tell you who you are and what your purpose is on this planet at this time. And that's how you have to go through that stuff. So, I hope in the new mythology of the magical universe that I'm talking about, that, it calls on people to have the courage to face all of those fears and go into them and deal with them, journal about them, write about them, talk about them, whatever, and just deal with them and get them out. Because on the other side is your true self. It's sort of like, it used to be when LA had the big smog over it, you'd take off and then you'd fly through the smog and you couldn't see anything and it was terrible, but then you'd break through into the clear blue sky. It's kind of like that. You got to go through your own smog to get to that clear blue sky on the other side. So that's what is known in mythology as Joseph Campbell will talk about the hero's journey. It's that journey inward that, we all need to take to really find out who we are and what we should be doing with our lives.
Yes. So, okay, can you tell us also a little bit about when your book is coming, will be available for people to buy it, and also maybe on Kindle, or can you give us some details? Who is the publisher?
Well, it's going to be self-published, and I'm still working on it. Right now, I'm just starting to try to do an audiobook version of it, but eventually it's going to be hopefully in 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's been a work in progress forever. But hopefully in a couple of months it'll be out as an ebook, as a Kindle book. But I'm also working now on an audio book for it, and maybe even a small hardback book.
Hopefully
also,
it will be available on Audible. I mean, maybe you should try.
Well, it'll be available on Kindle, on Amazon, and then
Yes.
I guess also I have to learn all about that, how that all works. But and then on my website, I think I can sell it off my website, although there's I have to learn all the rules, but
yes.
So if I do have a new website, so I think you're going to show the thing there so people can kind of stay up to date on it. I also post blogs on there that you can read more and get a broader view of exactly what I'm talking about. And, by all means, respond to the blogs and ask questions. Offer counterpointing points of view. I love counterpoints of view. I love people challenging it. I love to debate and discuss these kinds of things. I just say, try to keep it polite and nice and respect for each other and respect differences and points of view and whatnot. And, practice what they call netiquette, I guess. So, but yeah, other than that, I welcome disagreements or questions or anything, or support too.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really remember when I was your student at school. Believe me, your class was the most enjoyable class ever. Like, I have taken many classes, but the way you teach, it's just mind blowing. And I am glad that, and I'm honored by knowing you. And I believe that people should follow your example on this. And yeah, you offer great things to us, to American people also, and everyone. And I hope to see you again in other interviews, maybe in the future. And
yeah, well, thank you very much for all those kind compliments. I really enjoyed you in the class. You're always very participatory, and so any teacher loves somebody who participates, and not only just participates, but participates with good, thoughtful comments that also provoke other students or inspire other students to contribute also. So you were a great asset in the class.
Thank
And
you.
Who knows why our paths crossed back then, and now they're crossing again. So
Yes.
we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah,
and I'd be happy to do another interview sometime in the future if that works out.
yes. But just before we are done with the interview, you are working on two books, right? Not just one.
Well, actually, in a way, both books are finished. I'm more working right now on the audiobook of the quick one, and then and once I kind of get that done, and then I'll have to see. I'm getting the idea I should try to publish all of them, the ebook, the audiobook, and a hard copy book all at the same time.
Oh.
But maybe I'll change my mind and just do like the ebook and the audiobook first, and then maybe put a hard copy out there later. I'm not sure, but because I want to get the book out pretty quickly, it'll be available on Kindle at a pretty low price. So,
Yes.
Just because I want to get this out into the world as much as possible in these critical times.
Yeah, especially before November the 3rd. I believe we should change things. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Sohel. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast.
You too. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.